Welcome to Midnight Mystic Stories. I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow and helps us keep bringing more of the content you love. And be sure to comment below where you are tuning in from. Thank you and enjoy the video. As I swiped left and right, I stumbled upon a profile that caught my eye. His name was Mark, and his picture showed him standing in front of an old, somewhat eerie-looking house, surrounded by trees that seemed to loom over him. There was something about the way he looked at the camera, a mixture of confidence and mystery, that piqued my interest. His bio was short but intriguing. Loved the thrill of the unknown and the stories that lie behind closed doors. I wasn't sure what that meant, but it stirred something in me. I sent him a message, half expecting it to lead nowhere. To my surprise, Mark responded almost immediately. Our conversation flowed easily, and I found myself laughing at his jokes and sharing details about my life. He had a knack for making everything sound exciting. He spoke about his passion for photography, how he loved capturing abandoned places and the stories hidden away in them. Weirdly, it gave me a rush. Maybe it was the thrill of the unknown he mentioned that drew me in even more. After a few days of chatting, Mark suggested we meet. He picked a cafe that was a little off the beaten path, something that felt like it belonged in a different time. It had a vintage vibe, with worn furniture and dim lighting that made it feel cozy, yet slightly unsettling. I arrived first, my heart racing with a mix of anticipation and nerves. I could feel the weight of the atmosphere pressing down on me, but I brushed it off as excitement. When Mark walked in, he was even more striking in person. A confident smile stretched across his face as he approached me. We talked for hours, sharing stories and laughter, but there was an underlying tension that I couldn't quite shake. It was like there was an invisible thread tying us together, pulling me closer to him while also making me wary. He shared tales of his photography adventures, showing me some of his work on his phone. The images were haunting. Stark landscapes of abandoned buildings, dark corners, and shadowy figures. There was beauty in their decay, but they also sent a chill down my spine. As the evening went on, Mark suggested we go for a walk. I hesitated, glancing at my phone, the hour growing late, but something about him made it hard to say no. We wandered through the quiet streets, the cool air wrapping around us like a shroud. I felt drawn to him, yet the unease lingered at the back of my mind. We found ourselves in front of the old house, from his profile picture. It loomed larger in person, its windows dark and hollow, like eyes watching us. Mark's expression shifted as he looked at it, something almost reverent in his gaze. I felt a knot of anxiety twist in my stomach. "Do you want to go inside?" he asked, his voice low and inviting. A million red flags flared in my mind, but the thrill of adventure overpowered my instincts. I nodded, and he led me up the creaky steps to the door. It swung open easily, as if it had been waiting for us. Inside, the house was dimly lit by moonlight filtering through the dusty windows. The air was thick with the scent of mold and something else, something metallic. Mark pulled out a flashlight, illuminating the space as we stepped inside. The floorboards creaked beneath our weight, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were intruding on something that should have been left alone. Each room we explored felt more suffocating than the last, filled with remnants of a life long gone. Old furniture lay covered in sheets, like ghosts waiting to be uncovered. I could hear my heartbeat echoing in the silence, a reminder of how alone we truly were in this eerie place. As we ventured deeper into the house, Mark's demeanor began to change. He became animated, pointing out details in the walls, whispering stories he claimed to know about the previous owners. I watched him, captivated yet unnerved by this sudden shift. It was as if the house had awakened something in him, a darker side that sent chills down my spine. I wanted to leave, but a part of me couldn't look away, caught up in his enthusiasm. In one of the back rooms, we found an old mirror, the glass cracked and tarnished. Mark stood in front of it, his reflection distorted and strange. I moved to stand beside him, and for a moment, the world outside seemed to fade away. We were just two lost souls in a forgotten place. But then I noticed something in the mirror behind us, a shadow flitting past. My stomach dropped, and I turned to look, but there was nothing there. "Did you see that?" I whispered, my voice trembling. Mark laughed, but it was a harsh, empty sound. "It's just the house playing tricks on you," he said, but there was an edge to his tone that sent my heart racing. I wanted to believe him, but the unease settled deeper in my bones. We continued exploring, but the atmosphere grew heavier, as if the walls themselves were closing in on us. I could hear whispers now, faint and unintelligible, like the echoes of past conversations. Mark seemed unfazed, moving confidently through the house, but I felt a growing urge to escape. The thrill had turned to dread, and I made the excuse that I needed to go home. As we walked back towards the entrance, I noticed Mark was no longer beside me. I turned to find him standing in the shadows, a strange smile on his face. "You don't have to go yet," he said, his voice low and enticing. I felt a chill run down my spine as the whispers grew louder, wrapping around me like a cold embrace. "Stay with me a little longer." I shook my head, my pulse quickening. I really should go. I turned to leave, but he stepped in front of me, blocking my path. The playful spark in his eyes had vanished, replaced by something darker, something almost predatory. "You don't understand," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You're meant to be here." In that moment, everything clicked. The stories, the photos, the thrill of the unknown. He wasn't just a photographer. He was a collector of experiences, of lives, and I was just another chapter in his twisted tale. Panic surged through me, and I pushed past him, racing for the door. The shadows seemed to reach for me, clawing at my heels as I stumbled into the night. Once outside, I didn't stop running until I reached my car. I fumbled with my keys, breathing heavily, the adrenaline coursing through me. I glanced back at the house, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw Mark standing in the window, watching me, still smiling that unsettling smile. I jumped into the car, revved the engine, and sped off into the night, leaving the darkness behind. As I drove away, my heart finally began to slow, but the feeling of unease lingered. I couldn't shake the memory of his eyes, the way they had changed in an instant. This wasn't just a bad date. It was a warning, a reminder that some doors are best left closed. I had never considered online dating as a viable option, but life has a funny way of pushing you toward the unexpected. My friends were relentless, nudging me to give it a go. So, one lonely Friday night, I found myself swiping through profiles on a dating app called Hinge, feeling a mix of curiosity and skepticism. It all felt like a game, a gamble, as I thumbed through smiling faces and half-hearted bios. Then I saw his profile. He looked normal enough, maybe even a little shy, with tousled hair and a warm smile that somehow felt inviting. His bio was vague but sweet, mentioning his love for horror movies and hiking. I felt a jolt of excitement, something I hadn't felt in ages. I liked his vibe and sent a message, hoping he would respond. That was the beginning of my descent into a world I never anticipated. His name was Mark, and our chat started innocently enough. He was witty and charming, sharing his favorite horror movies and asking about mine. By the end of the week, we had exchanged a flurry of messages, each one more enticing than the last. He suggested we meet up for a hike at a nearby state park, a suggestion that thrilled me and terrified me in equal measure. I could feel the nerves bubbling up inside me, but a part of me craved the adventure. The day of the hike arrived, the sun shining brightly, casting a golden hue over everything. I parked my car at the trailhead, butterflies swirling in my stomach as I stepped out into the crisp air. The forest loomed ahead, thick and alive, shadows dancing among the trees. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stepping into a different world, one where anything could happen. I waited for Mark at the designated spot, the chirping of birds and rustling of leaves surrounding me. As I glanced around, I felt a twinge of anxiety. What if he didn't show? Or worse, what if he was someone completely different from the charming guy I had been chatting with? But then I saw him, making his way down the path, waving with a smile that made the tension in my shoulders ease. We started our hike, chatting and laughing as we walked through the winding trails. The forest was beautiful, but there was something unsettling about it too. The trees stood tall and imposing, their branches reaching out like hands clawing at the sky. As we ventured deeper, the sunlight filtering through the leaves created eerie patterns on the ground, and I felt like we were slipping into another realm. Mark was easy to talk to, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He had a way of sidestepping questions about his past, a vague air that left me unsettled. I brushed it off as nerves and kept the conversation light, but the feeling lingered like a shadow. After an hour of hiking, we reached a clearing, a small pond surrounded by thick vegetation. The water was still, a perfect mirror reflecting the trees and sky. We sat on a fallen log, and I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. Maybe this was just my imagination running wild, I thought, trying to shake off the nervous energy that clung to me. As we chatted, Mark leaned in closer, his laughter echoing in the stillness. He told me about his passion for photography, showing me some pictures on his phone. They were stunning, capturing both the beauty of nature and something darker lurking just beneath the surface. I found myself leaning in, captivated by his stories, but there was a flicker in his eyes that sent a chill down my spine. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. The sun dipped behind the trees, casting elongated shadows that made the clearing feel more isolated. I glanced around, the forest suddenly feeling like a maze, and the way the wind rustled the leaves created an eerie whisper that made my heart race. Feeling the tension rise, I suggested we head back, but Mark insisted we stay a little longer. His enthusiasm was infectious, and despite my unease, I found myself laughing again as he recounted a funny story from one of his hikes. Just as I felt the tightness in my chest ease, the laughter stopped abruptly, and I looked up to see his expression shift. It was as if a mask had slipped away, revealing something darker. His smile morphed into a strange intensity, and I felt the air grow thick with an unspoken tension. I wanted to brush it off, tell myself it was just my imagination, but my instinct screamed at me to leave. I forced a smile, making up some excuse about needing to get back before dark. But as I stood up, he grabbed my wrist, his grip surprisingly firm. The playful light in his eyes had been replaced by something colder, something predatory. I felt a surge of panic, my heart racing as I yanked my arm away, confusion flooding my mind. "Let's just enjoy the moment," he said, his voice smooth but laced with an edge that made my skin crawl. I could feel the weight of his gaze on me, his enthusiasm turning into something unsettlingly possessive. I took a step back, trying to create distance, but he moved closer, invading my space in a way that sent alarm bells ringing in my mind. I knew I had to get out of there. The woods felt alive, the trees whispering secrets as I turned and started to walk away. My heart pounded in my chest as I quickened my pace, the sense of dread growing with each step. I could hear him behind me, his footsteps echoing in the silence of the forest, and I fought the urge to look back. I stumbled on a root, nearly losing my balance, and that's when I heard him laugh, a low, chilling sound that echoed through the trees. The fear surged within me, propelling me forward. I could see the path ahead, the safety of the trailhead beckoning me, but the forest seemed to shift around me, branches clawing at my arms as I pushed through. As I neared the clearing, I glanced back, my heart in my throat. He was still behind me, his face twisted into a grin that sent icy fingers down my spine. I sprinted, adrenaline fueling my every move, the world around me blurring as I focused on escape. I burst into the clearing, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I spotted my car. I fumbled for my keys, hands shaking as I struggled to unlock the door. Behind me, I could hear him approaching, his footsteps steady, almost casual, as if he were enjoying the chase. Just as I managed to unlock the door, I turned to see him step into the clearing, a sinister calm radiating from him. My heart raced as I jumped into the car, slamming the door shut and locking it. As I looked up, I saw his reflection in the window, a shadowy figure with a smile that made my blood run cold. I turned the ignition, desperate to get away, when I noticed something strange. My phone buzzed with a notification, and I glanced down to see a message from Mark. It was a picture of me, taken from the trees. My stomach dropped as I realized he had been watching me long, before I ever swiped right on his profile. Suddenly, the air felt heavy, the weight of realization crashing down on me. I wasn't just dealing with a creepy date. I was in the presence of someone who had carefully crafted a facade to lure me into his world. With shaking hands, I drove away, the forest fading into the rearview mirror. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being hunted, the knowledge that I had narrowly escaped something far more sinister than a bad day. The world felt different now, shadows lurking in every corner, and I realized that sometimes the darkness isn't in the woods, but in the people we least expect. It started off as just another boring Saturday night. I was sprawled on my couch, scrolling through my phone, looking for some entertainment. My friends were all busy, and I was stuck in my small apartment with only the faint hum of the fridge to keep me company. That's when I stumbled upon this dating app called Hinge. I had heard people talk about it, how it was supposed to be different from all the other apps out there, more genuine, less swiping, and more real connections. I figured, why not? What did I have to lose? I downloaded it and started filling out my profile. The questions were quirky, designed to show off my personality, like, what's your favorite way to spend a Sunday? Or, what's the most spontaneous thing you've ever done? I went for honest answers, adding a bit of humor here and there. After a few minutes, I was all set, and my profile was live. I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety flood through me. Within minutes, I started getting matches. Most were fairly standard, guys with pictures of themselves at bars or hiking. Then, I received a notification from someone named Ethan. His profile was intriguing. He had a quirky smile, and his bio caught my attention. He talked about his love for horror movies and how he believed the best conversations happened over a cup of coffee. It wasn't the usual, "Hey, what's up?" that I was used to. There was a certain depth to him that piqued my interest. We started chatting, and the conversation flowed easily. He was funny, and I appreciated his dark sense of humor. As the night wore on, something about him felt oddly familiar, like I had known him forever. We talked about our favorite movies, shared ghost stories, and laughed about our mutual phobias. By the end of the night, I was already looking forward to our first date. We decided to meet at a small coffee shop that was known for its creepy vibe. The place was tucked away in a dimly lit alley, with flickering neon lights that barely illuminated the entrance. It was the kind of spot that felt like it had secrets hidden in its shadows. I arrived early, heart pounding in my chest. I took a seat in a corner, trying to calm my nerves while scanning the room. When Ethan walked in, I felt an unexpected flutter in my stomach. He looked even better in person, dressed casually yet stylishly. He spotted me right away and sauntered over with a confident grin. The initial awkwardness melted away as we talked, and I found myself getting lost in his stories. He spoke passionately about his love for the macabre, his eyes lighting up as he recounted tales of unsolved mysteries and urban legends. I shared my own spooky experiences, and we found ourselves leaning closer, completely absorbed in the conversation. As the night went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something off about him. It was subtle, a shadow behind his smile, but it was there. I brushed it off, telling myself I was just being paranoid. After all, he was charming and captivating. We ended the night with plans to meet again, and as we said our goodbyes, he gave me a lingering look that sent a chill down my spine. The following week, we met again, this time at his apartment. He lived in an old building with creaky floors and dim lighting, which only added to the eerie atmosphere. As I stepped inside, I noticed the walls were adorned with horror movie posters, a shrine to his obsession. The place felt like a haunted museum, and I couldn't help but feel a strange thrill mixed with apprehension. We settled onto the couch, and he put on a classic horror film. I tried to focus on the movie, but my mind was racing. He was so knowledgeable about the genre, dissecting every scene, but every now and then, he would glance at me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. The more we watched, the more I felt the weight of his gaze, as if he were studying me, searching for something. After the film, we ended up talking late into the night. He shared stories about his childhood, how he grew up in a small town where strange things happened, things that people still whispered about. I listened, enraptured yet uneasy, as he talked about the things that went bump in the night. It was all thrilling and terrifying, but something in the back of my mind kept nagging at me. As I prepared to leave, I caught a glimpse of something on his bookshelf, a collection of old, dusty books. One of them caught my eye. It was a book on local legends, filled with tales of hauntings and disappearances. I reached for it, feeling a strange pull, but he quickly interjected, a little too forcefully. "Those are just for decoration," he said, a hint of something in his voice that made my stomach drop. I nodded, feeling the tension in the air shift. I brushed it off, telling myself I was overthinking everything again. After all, he was just a guy I met on a dating app, right? But the following weekend, things took a darker turn. I received a message from Ethan, asking if I wanted to accompany him on a late-night adventure. My heart raced with both excitement and dread. He didn't give me many details, but said it would be a memorable experience. Part of me wanted to say no, but the thrill of the unknown pulled me in. We met at his place, and he drove us to an abandoned building on the outskirts of town. It was an old asylum, shrouded in urban legends about the experiments that had taken place there. The air was thick with tension as we stepped inside, the floorboards creaking beneath our feet. The darkness enveloped us, and my heart pounded in my chest. As we explored the decaying halls, Ethan seemed to thrive in the eerie atmosphere. He led me deeper into the building, and I felt a growing sense of dread. The shadows seemed to whisper secrets, and I could almost hear the echoes of long-lost souls. I tried to keep up with his enthusiasm, but the deeper we went, the more I felt like I was stepping into something far darker than I had anticipated. Suddenly, he stopped in front of a heavy door, a strange glint in his eye. He pulled out a flashlight and turned to me, his expression shifting from playful to serious. "You ready for this?" he asked, and I felt a rush of panic. There was something in his tone, something almost predatory. Before I could respond, he pushed the door open, and a wave of cold air rushed over us. Inside was a room filled with old medical equipment, rusted and forgotten. My stomach churned at the sight, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. But Ethan seemed enthralled, stepping further inside, as if he was drawn to the darkness. That's when I noticed something in the corner of the room, a small, locked chest. My curiosity got the better of me, and I approached it slowly. Ethan watched me intently, his eyes glimmering with an unsettling excitement. I knelt down and examined the chest, my heart racing. As I touched the lock, I felt a jolt of electricity surge through me. In that moment, I realized I had to get out. The atmosphere was suffocating, and something was off about Ethan. He wasn't just a guy who loved horror. He had an obsession that went deeper than I could comprehend. I turned to leave, but he stepped in front of me, blocking my way. "Don't you want to know what's inside?" he asked, his voice low and hypnotic. I could feel my pulse racing, every instinct screaming at me to run. I pushed past him, adrenaline surging, and bolted for the door. But he caught up to me, grabbing my wrist. I could see the shadows dancing in his eyes, a darkness that sent chills down my spine. I managed to break free and ran, my heart pounding in my ears. I didn't stop until I was outside, gasping for breath, the night air hitting me like a wave of relief. I didn't look back as I sprinted to my car, fumbling with the keys in my shaking hands. I drove away, the adrenaline coursing through me, my mind racing with the realization that he wasn't just a regular guy. Ethan was something much more sinister, someone who thrived in the darkness, a predator hiding behind a charming facade. As I pulled onto the main road, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Ethan, and my heart sank as I read it. "You shouldn't have run. You don't know what you're missing." I felt a chill creep down my spine, a reminder that sometimes the monsters we fear are not just figments of our imagination, but real people lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I never thought online dating could be the gateway to something so twisted, but here I am, recounting what happened after I matched with a guy named Jake on this Hinge app. I mean, I had been swiping through profiles for weeks, feeling more and more like a ghost haunting the digital world, when I finally came across his picture. He was cute, with tousled hair and a charming smile that lit up his eyes. The kind of guy you'd expect to find at a coffee shop, sipping a latte and reading Hemingway. I hit the like button without much thought, and to my surprise, we matched almost immediately. We started chatting, and his texts were playful, laced with a touch of mystery that kept me hooked. There was something about the way he wrote that sent a chill down my spine, but in a good way. He shared little snippets about his life, how he worked in a dimly lit bookstore and had an obsession with collecting obscure horror novels. It was like he was pulling me into a web of intrigue, and I didn't even realize it. After a few days of back and forth messages, Jake suggested we meet in person. I hesitated for a moment, that familiar anxiety creeping in. I had heard horror stories, people disappearing after meeting someone from a dating app. But there was something about Jake that felt different. Maybe it was his way of weaving stories, or perhaps it was the cryptic mentions of his favorite horror movies that made me feel oddly safe. So, I agreed to meet him at a local cafe, a cozy little place tucked away in a quiet part of town. When I arrived, I scanned the room, my heart racing. The cafe had a warm ambience, filled with the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the soft hum of conversation. I spotted him sitting in a corner, his head bent over a book. He looked just like his pictures, but there was something unsettling about the way he was absorbed in that novel. I approached, and he looked up, a grin spreading across his face. "Hey," he said, but it felt more like a command than a greeting. As we exchanged pleasantries and talked about our favorite books, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to him than what met the eye. The conversation flowed, but Jake had a tendency to steer it towards dark topics, discussing horror stories and psychological thrillers with an intensity that made me uneasy. The more we talked, the more I felt like I was peeling back layers of a very complex individual. He shared tales of his childhood, filled with eerie experiences in an old house that had once belonged to his grandparents. He spoke of strange noises at night and shadows darting in the corners of his vision. It was captivating, but I could feel a sense of dread creeping in as he vividly described the unease he felt growing up. As the night wore on, I found myself glancing at the clock, feeling the weight of the darkness outside. The cafe was starting to empty, the chatter dwindling, and that's when Jake suggested we take a walk. Something in my gut told me to decline, but curiosity won over, and I found myself agreeing. We stepped out into the cool night air, the streetlights casting long shadows on the pavement. Jake led the way, his footsteps echoing in the silence. As we walked, he began to share more about his fascination with the macabre. He spoke of a book he was writing, one that delved into the psyche of a killer, exploring what drove someone to commit such horrific acts. There was a fire in his eyes that sent a chill down my spine. It was as if he was reveling in the darkness of it all. I tried to steer the conversation back to lighter subjects, but he wasn't having it. His intensity grew, and I could feel my heart rate picking up. The streets were deserted, and the shadows seemed to creep closer. Every time I glanced at him, it felt like he was analyzing my reaction, as if he was trying to gauge how far he could push me. It was disconcerting. After a while, we ended up in a small park, the moonlight filtering through the trees. I suggested we sit for a moment, desperate for a break from the oppressive atmosphere. He obliged, but as we sat there, I noticed something peculiar. He had brought a small notebook with him, and he was scribbling furiously. It felt intrusive, like I was being studied rather than enjoyed as company. "What are you writing?" I asked, trying to ease the tension. He glanced up, a smile playing on his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just some observations," he said cryptically. "You'd be surprised how much you can learn about people in just a few hours." I felt a shiver run down my spine. I forced a laugh, thinking maybe he was just being quirky, but the unease settled back in. I was starting to feel trapped, like a character in one of those horror stories he loved so much. The longer I sat with him, the more I realized I didn't know anything about this guy. The conversation turned darker, and before I knew it, he was sharing an unsettling story about a woman who disappeared in a similar park. He described it with such vivid detail, the kind that made my stomach churn. It was as if he was weaving a tale, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was more than just a story to him. When I finally gathered the courage to suggest we head back, Jake's demeanor shifted. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "But we've only just begun to explore the night." Alarm bells went off in my head, and my instincts kicked in. I stood up abruptly, the chill of fear gripping me. I made an excuse about needing to get home, but he didn't move. Instead, he remained seated, an unsettling calm washing over him. "I understand," he said, the smile slipping from his face. "But you really shouldn't run away. It's not safe out here when you're alone." That sentence hung in the air, heavy with a threat I couldn't ignore. Heart pounding, I turned to leave, but he caught my wrist. I could feel the warmth of his grip, and something primal surged within me. I yanked my arm away, adrenaline coursing through my veins as I bolted down the path. I didn't look back, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I sprinted toward the main street, praying I wouldn't hear his footsteps chasing after me. The world around me blurred as panic took over. I could see the glow of the streetlights ahead, a beacon of safety. When I finally reached the street, I turned to catch my breath, scanning the shadows for any sign of him. But he didn't follow. Instead, I spotted a flicker of light coming from my phone. A message popped up on the screen, and I froze. "Did you think you could escape?" It was from Jake. I felt the blood drain from my face, an icy realization washing over me. He had been watching me the whole time, not just during our date, but even now, as I stood there trembling. Every detail of my life had been an open book to him, an endless source of inspiration for whatever dark narrative he was crafting. I didn't waste another second. I ran home, the weight of dread heavy on my chest. The horror wasn't just in the stories he told. It was in the knowledge that I had unknowingly stepped into a nightmare. As I collapsed onto my bed that night, I realized that dating apps could lead to unexpected horrors. But the most terrifying part was the realization that the monsters aren't always the ones lurking in the shadows. Sometimes, they're just a swipe away. I had heard mixed reviews about it, but I was feeling adventurous, maybe even a little reckless. I set up my profile and started swiping, half-heartedly at first. Most of the profiles were the same. Cute smiles, cheesy quotes, and a couple of awkward selfies. But then I saw her. Her name was Mia. Her profile picture caught my attention immediately. She was sitting on a rooftop, the sunset casting a warm glow around her. There was something about her smile that seemed genuine, and her bio was refreshingly honest. She talked about her love for hiking and photography, and how she believed in the power of connection. I felt a little spark of excitement as I swiped right. To my surprise, we matched almost instantly. We started chatting, and it felt effortless. I couldn't help but be drawn to her. She was quirky and funny, and there was a depth to her that made me want to know more. After a few days of back-and-forth texts, we decided to meet up. We agreed to meet at this little cafe on the corner of 5th and Maple. It was quaint, with fairy lights strung across the patio and a cozy vibe that felt inviting. The day of our date, I was a bundle of nerves. I dressed carefully, wanting to impress without looking like I was trying too hard. As I walked to the cafe, I couldn't shake this feeling of anticipation mixed with dread. I arrived early, sitting at a small table outside, the scent of fresh coffee wafting through the air. My heart raced as I glanced around, waiting for her to arrive. When Mia walked in, I couldn't help but smile. She looked even better in person. We hugged, and I noticed something strange. Her hug was a bit too tight, almost like she was holding on for dear life. We settled into our conversation, and I found myself completely captivated by her stories. She spoke about her family, her dreams, and even her fears. But every now and then, she would glance around, her eyes darting to the street and the cafe door as if she was expecting someone or something. I brushed it off as nerves. Maybe she was just shy, or perhaps she had a history that made her a little jumpy. We ordered some pastries, and that's when things took a turn. Mia started talking about her past relationships, and I could feel a shift in the atmosphere. Her voice became tense, and her eyes darkened slightly. She mentioned a stalker from a previous relationship, someone who had made her feel unsafe. My heart sank, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Yet, I tried to reassure her, telling her that she was safe here, but she seemed lost in her thoughts, staring past me as if she could see something lurking just outside the cafe. I attempted to lighten the mood with a joke, but it fell flat. Instead of laughter, I was met with a silence that hung heavy in the air. As the sun began to set, casting eerie shadows across the pavement, Mia suggested we take a walk. I agreed, wanted to keep the momentum of our date going. We strolled down the street, the fading light creating long shadows behind us. I tried to engage her in conversation, but she remained distant, her eyes scanning our surroundings. We reached a park nearby, and she led me to a secluded area, away from the bustling streets. The trees loomed overhead like silent sentinels, and I felt the temperature drop a few degrees. Mia seemed to relax a bit, but her demeanor was still off. She started talking about her love for photography again, and how she often took pictures of abandoned places. I found it intriguing, but the way she spoke about it felt almost obsessive, as if she was trying to convey something deeper. Suddenly, she stopped walking and turned to face me. Her expression was intense, almost frenzied. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. She told me about her latest project, how she had stumbled upon an old, decrepit house at the edge of town. There was something in her eyes, a glimmer of excitement mixed with fear, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. She described the house in vivid detail, how the paint was peeling and the windows were shattered. There was a history to it that she felt compelled to uncover. I tried to steer the conversation away, but she was lost in her thoughts, her excitement palpable. It was as if she was trying to pull me into her world, a world that felt increasingly dangerous. I suggested we head back, but she insisted on showing me a picture she had taken at the house. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through her gallery until she found it. I leaned in to see the image, but as I looked closer, I felt my stomach drop. The photo was haunting. It captured the house in all its decaying glory, but in one of the windows, there was a figure. It was hard to tell what it was at first, but as I squinted, I realized it looked like a person. My heart raced as I searched Mia's face for a reaction, but she seemed unfazed, almost thrilled. She started talking about how she felt a connection to the place, how it was as if the spirits of those who had lived there were calling out to her. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. This wasn't the light-hearted date I had signed up for. The atmosphere shifted, the air thick with tension. I suggested we head back to the cafe, but she grabbed my arm tightly, her grip sending a jolt of panic through me. She insisted we explore the house together, saying she needed someone to share the experience with. Against my better judgment, I found myself agreeing. We drove to the outskirts of town, the road winding into the darkness. The house loomed ahead, silhouetted against the moonlit sky. It was even creepier in person, and as we stepped out of the car, I felt a chill run down my spine. Mia seemed invigorated, her eyes sparkling with excitement. I, on the other hand, felt a gnawing sense of dread. As we approached the front door, I hesitated. My gut was screaming at me to turn back, but I didn't want to ruin the moment for her. The door creaked open, revealing a darkened interior filled with dust and shadows. Mia stepped inside, her phone light illuminating the path ahead. I followed reluctantly, the air thick with the smell of mildew and decay. Every creak of the floorboards echoed through the silence. Mia was in her element, taking pictures and whispering to herself about the history of the place. I felt like an intruder, an unwelcome guest in a world that didn't belong to me. As we moved deeper into the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. Mia paused suddenly, her face pale. She pointed to a doorway at the end of the hallway. There was a flicker of movement, and I felt my heart race. I wanted to bolt, but she urged me to stay. We crept closer, the tension building with every step. I could barely breathe. The air felt thick with an unseen presence. Then we reached the doorway. I peered inside, my breath hitching in my throat. The room was empty, but the feeling of being watched intensified. I turned back to Mia, and to my horror, I saw a look of pure exhilaration on her face. She was captivated, entranced by the darkness that surrounded us. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind us, plunging us into darkness. Panic surged through me, and I grabbed Mia's arm, but she pulled away, laughing. It was an eerie, hollow laugh that sent shivers down my spine. She was no longer the girl I had met at the cafe. She had transformed into something unrecognizable. I felt the walls closing in, my mind racing. I had to get out. I pushed past her, fumbling for the door, but it wouldn't budge. I could hear her breathing behind me, heavy and deliberate. I turned to face her, and the realization hit me like a freight train. She wasn't just fascinated by the house. She was drawn to it, as if it had called her home. In that moment, I understood the truth. The figure in the window wasn't just a coincidence. It was part of her. She was entwined with the darkness of this place, and I was standing in the eye of a storm. I managed to pry the door open, stumbling backward into the hallway. I ran, not looking back, my heart pounding in my chest. As I fled the house, the night air felt like a lifeline. I didn't stop until I reached my car, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the keys. I glanced back, expecting to see her following me, but the house stood silent, watching. As I drove away, I could still feel her presence, lurking somewhere in the shadows, forever tied to that haunted place. I never spoke to Mia again, but I still think about her sometimes. That night changed me in ways I can't fully understand. The darkness she had embraced was now a part of me, a chilling reminder of a connection that had been forged in fear. I deleted the app, but the memory of her and the house remains, a haunting echo that lingers long after the night has faded into silence. I was scrolling through my Hinge app late one night, the kind of night that feels like it drags on forever. My thumb flicked through profiles, each one more boring than the last. That's when I saw her. Her name was Mia, and her profile was simple yet captivating. A stunning photo of her laughing in a sunlit park, and a quirky bio that hinted at a love for horror movies. I felt a spark of excitement. For once, here was someone who seemed genuine. I swiped right, and within moments, we matched. The conversation started off light and fun. We shared our favorite horror flicks, which felt like an instant connection. I was drawn in by her enthusiasm for the genre, and as the messages flowed, I found myself looking forward to each notification. There was something about her energy that was refreshing. She suggested we meet at a quaint little cafe on the outskirts of town, known for its eerie yet charming ambience. I agreed without hesitation. The day of our date arrived, and I dressed cautiously, wanting to make a good impression. The cafe was nestled in a part of town I had never visited before, surrounded by ancient trees that seemed to whisper secrets to one another. As I parked my car, I felt a chill in the air, but I brushed it off. After all, it was October, and the leaves were just starting to turn. Walking into the cafe, I was met with the scent of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the aroma of baked goods. The dim lighting cast long shadows, giving the place an almost haunted feel. I scanned the room and spotted Mia sitting at a corner table, her vibrant smile cutting through the gloom. She looked even better in person, her dark hair falling perfectly over her shoulders. I waved, and she waved back, her expression lighting up like a flickering candle. As we talked, the conversation flowed effortlessly. We exchanged stories about our childhood fears, and I learned that she had an obsession with ghost hunting. The way she described her adventures sent shivers down my spine, but in a good way. There was a thrill in every word, and I couldn't help but hang on her every sentence. But as the hours passed, I started to notice something unsettling. The cafe was becoming emptier, the laughter and chatter of patrons fading into silence. It was just us now, and I felt an odd tension in the air. Mia seemed unfazed by the growing quietness, her eyes sparkling with mischief as she shared more chilling tales. I wanted to ask if she noticed, but I didn't want to break the spell she had cast. As the clock ticked closer to closing time, I suggested we take a walk. There was a small park nearby, one I'd seen on the way in. Mia agreed, her eyes lighting up at the idea. The night air was crisp, and the moon hung low, casting an eerie glow on the path ahead. We walked side by side, the conversation taking a darker turn. She spoke of urban legends and ghost stories, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I felt a mix of excitement and unease, like I was stepping into one of the horror movies we both loved. Just as I was starting to feel truly comfortable, we reached a secluded spot in the park. The trees loomed overhead, their branches twisting like skeletal fingers. Suddenly, Mia stopped and turned to me, her expression shifting. There was something intense in her gaze, something that sent a pulse of adrenaline racing through me. I was about to ask what was wrong when she raised a finger to her lips, signaling me to be quiet. My heart raced as I looked around, the night air thick with anticipation. Then, from the shadows, emerged a figure. A man, tall and shrouded in darkness, stepped into the moonlight. My instinct screamed at me to run, but I was frozen in place. Mia's demeanor shifted again, a strange smile creeping across her face. She turned to me, and I saw a glimmer of something in her eyes. It felt predatory, almost feral. I wanted to scream, to get away, but my body wouldn't cooperate. The man approached us, his features obscured in the dim light. I could feel the air around us crackle with tension. Mia moved closer to me, her hand brushing against mine, but it felt wrong, as if she were trying to draw me into some dark plan. The man spoke, though I couldn't make out his words. Mia's smile widened, and I felt a chill creep down my spine. My instincts kicked in, and I finally found the strength to step back, breaking whatever spell had held me captive. I turned to run, adrenaline flooding my veins. But as I glanced back, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Mia was standing there, still smiling, but her expression had morphed into something sinister. The man, now fully illuminated, looked eerily familiar. It was a face I recognized from news reports, a local criminal who had been missing for years. The realization hit me like a punch. This wasn't just a date, it was a trap. Mia had lured me in with her charm, her stories, and now I was caught in a web of danger. I ran through the park, my heart pounding in my chest, desperation fueling my flight. I could hear footsteps behind me, but I didn't dare look back. I sprinted toward my car, praying I wouldn't stumble. When I finally reached my vehicle, my hands trembled as I fumbled for my keys. I felt a rush of relief as I jumped inside and locked the doors. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see Mia and her accomplice looming behind me. But all I saw was darkness. I drove home in a daze, the weight of the night pressing down on me. I couldn't shake the feeling of being hunted, of being just one step away from something terrible. Once home, I locked every door and turned on every light, trying to dispel the shadows that seemed to cling to me. Days passed, and I thought the nightmare was over. I deleted the app, convinced that I'd learned my lesson about online dating. But then, one night, I received a notification. A new message popped up from Mia. My heart raced as I opened it, expecting more horror, but what I found was chilling. The message was simple. I had so much fun the other night. Let's do it again soon. I know some great places to explore. The hairs on my arms stood on end, and I felt a cold sweat break out across my forehead. That's when I realized the truth. I wasn't the first, and I certainly wouldn't be the last. Mia wasn't just a girl looking for love. She was a predator, and I had narrowly escaped her clutches. I had never been one to embrace the world of online dating, but after a particularly grueling breakup, I found myself scrolling through Hinge late one night. The glowing screen felt like a portal to a different life, one filled with excitement and possibility. I was drawn in by the profiles, the carefully curated photos, and the hopeful bios that promised connections. It seemed harmless enough, so I set up my profile, showcasing my love for hiking, horror movies, and quirky coffee shops. As days rolled by, I matched with a guy named Alex. He had this rugged charm, a smile that radiated warmth, and stories about his adventures that pulled me in. We hit it off right away, chatting about everything from our favorite films to our most embarrassing moments. There was something magnetic about him, a thrill that sent tingles down my spine every time my phone buzzed with a new message from him. After a week of late-night chats and playful banter, Alex suggested we meet up in person. He proposed a quaint little diner on the outskirts of town, a place known for its retro vibe and killer milkshakes. I felt a mix of excitement and nerves as I agreed, the prospect of finally seeing him face to face igniting butterflies in my stomach. The night of our date arrived, and I slipped into my favorite cozy sweater, hoping to project the perfect blend of casual and cute. The diner was bathed in soft neon lights, casting a dreamy glow over the checkered floor. As I walked in, my heart raced in anticipation, scanning the room for a familiar face. And there he was, seated in a booth, looking just as charming as his pictures. I slid into the seat across from him, and we exchanged smiles. The conversation flowed effortlessly, and the world outside faded into the background. We laughed, shared stories, and sipped on milkshakes that tasted like nostalgia itself. It felt like a scene out of a romantic comedy, the kind where everything clicks and the chemistry is undeniable. But as the night progressed, I noticed something strange lurking beneath the surface. Alex had a way of looking at me that felt almost too intense, like he was searching for something hidden behind my eyes. I brushed it off as typical first-date jitters, but the feeling lingered, creeping into my thoughts. The diner was busy, yet I felt isolated in our little bubble, as if we were the only two people in the universe. After we finished eating, Alex suggested a walk through the nearby park. I agreed, thinking it would be nice to stretch our legs and enjoy the cool night air. As we strolled under the flickering streetlights, the atmosphere shifted. The park felt different in the dark, shadows dancing wildly as if they had a mind of their own. The laughter from the diner faded away, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. I could feel the tension building, a thick fog of uncertainty wrapping around us. Alex's demeanor changed too. He started sharing darker stories, tales of ghost encounters and urban legends that sent chills down my spine. I tried to laugh it off, but the way he spoke, with an intensity that felt almost obsessive, made me uneasy. With each passing moment, I felt the weight of his gaze, like he was peeling back layers I hadn't intended to share. My stomach twisted into knots, and I found myself clutching my phone tightly, the familiar comfort of technology feeling like a lifeline. Then came the moment that sent my heart racing. We reached a secluded part of the park, where the trees loomed like sentinels, blocking out the moonlight. Alex stopped and turned to face me, his expression shifting from playful to serious. He leaned in closer, and I could feel my pulse quicken. It was all too fast, too intense. He spoke about how rare connections are, how he felt like we were meant to meet. It was sweet in a way, but there was an edge to his words that made my instincts scream. I took a step back, trying to create some space, but he closed the distance. The air felt heavy, charged with something unspoken, and I glanced around, suddenly aware of how isolated we were. Just as I was about to suggest we head back, I noticed a flicker of movement in the shadows behind him. My heart raced as I squinted into the darkness, trying to make sense of what I saw. Was it just my imagination, or was there someone watching us? I couldn't shake the feeling of being observed, the hairs on the back of my neck prickling with unease. In a split second, Alex turned, and I could see the shift in his expression. Anger or frustration, I couldn't tell. He called out, challenging whatever was lurking in the shadows. My heart was in my throat, the adrenaline coursing through me as I stood frozen in place. Suddenly, a figure emerged, stepping into the dim light. It was a woman, her face partially obscured by a hood. My breath hitched as she approached us, an unsettling calm radiating from her. I felt a wave of panic crash over me, my instincts screaming at me to run. "Who are you?" Alex demanded, but the woman didn't answer. Instead, she locked her gaze on me, her eyes piercing through the darkness. I felt like she could see right into my soul, and I wanted to scream, to run, but my feet felt glued to the ground. In a chilling moment, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small object, glinting in the low light. My heart dropped as she held it up, a small silver locket. My locket. I had lost it months ago, a gift from my grandmother that had slipped from my neck while I was out hiking. "Looking for this?" she said, her voice smooth yet laced with malice. I felt sick, the world spinning around me. How did she have it? My mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of reality. Alex's expression morphed from confusion to realization, and I could see the panic settling in his eyes. "You know her?" he asked, but I barely heard him. All I could focus on was the woman's gaze, the way it held a twisted sense of familiarity. With a swift motion, she tossed the locket at my feet, and I instinctively reached down to pick it up. The moment I touched it, a flood of memories washed over me, memories that didn't belong to me. I stumbled back, the realization crashing into me like a tidal wave. These were memories of the woman, dark and twisted. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. Alex hadn't been the charming guy I thought he was. He was a predator, drawn to my vulnerabilities. The woman wasn't just a stranger. She was a part of some sick game. I was the target, the unwitting player in a horror story that was unfolding before my eyes. As I stood there, the weight of the locket in my hand, I knew I had to escape. I turned and ran, the sound of their voices fading behind me as I sprinted toward the park exit. The night air felt electric, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. I didn't look back, not stopping until I reached the safety of my car, breathless and terrified. In the days that followed, I tried to piece together what had happened. The memories from the locket haunted me, leaving me restless and anxious. I deleted my Hinge profile, vowing never to return to the world of online dating. But deep down, I knew that this wasn't the end. I could feel the shadows lurking, the whispers of a darkness that would always chase me, reminding me that the scariest monsters often wear the faces of those we trust. I was scrolling through the app late that night, half-heartedly swiping left and right on faces that all started to blur together. The glow of my phone illuminated the darkness of my room, casting strange shadows across the walls. I had been single for way too long, and the thought of meeting someone new was both exciting and terrifying. I was tired of the usual bars and parties. I wanted something different, something thrilling. Maybe that's why I found myself drawn to a profile that seemed a bit off. His name was Jake, and his pictures had a raw edge to them, dark, moody shots that looked like they were taken in abandoned places, the kind of spots that whispered secrets to anyone willing to listen. His bio was short, just a few cryptic lines about seeking adventure and living life on the edge. I felt a rush of excitement. It was like a spark, a little voice in my head screaming that this could be the escape I craved. I swiped right, and just like that, we matched. The messages started flowing. He was charming in a way that felt almost intoxicating. He talked about exploring the city's hidden gems, and somehow, I was swept up in his enthusiasm. He suggested we meet in person, at an old, secluded cafe on the edge of town. Something about it felt thrilling, but a warning bell rang quietly in the back of my mind. The day of our meeting, I wore my favorite leather jacket and a pair of combat boots, wanting to look tough but still approachable. As I approached the cafe, a chill ran down my spine. The place was dimly lit, more of a shadow than a building, with ivy creeping up its brick walls. Inside, it smelled of old wood and lingering coffee, the air thick with the weight of secrets. I spotted him in the corner, with a beanie pulled low over his eyes, the only light catching the sharp angles of his face. He was even more intriguing up close, but I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was off. We started chatting, but it felt like he was probing me, asking questions that were too personal too soon. I shared stories about my life, but he seemed to twist them into something darker, something that made me question my own memories. He had a way of making me doubt myself, and the laughter that should have come easily felt forced. I tried to brush it off, convincing myself I was just being paranoid. After all, he was charming, right? But as the conversation wore on, the cafe's dim light seemed to grow darker, and shadows danced in the corners of my vision. Jake suggested we take a walk afterward, and something inside me fluttered with both excitement and dread. I didn't want to seem rude, so I agreed, hoping fresh air would clear the strange tension that had settled over us. We walked through the quiet streets, the usual city sounds muted under the weight of the night. As we strolled, he pointed out old buildings and shared odd tales about each one, but there was something unsettling in his tone. It was as if he relished in the dark history of the places he spoke about, almost like he was trying to pull me into a world I wasn't ready for. Then, he led me to an alleyway that seemed to stretch on forever. The walls were covered in graffiti, vibrant colors that clashed against the gloom. A flickering streetlight cast erratic shadows, and I felt the air shift, thickening with a sense of foreboding. He turned to me, his eyes gleaming with an intensity that made my heart race. He leaned in closer, and for a moment, I thought he might kiss me. Instead, he whispered about the thrill of danger, about how life was meant to be lived on the edge, and I felt a shiver of unease crawl up my spine. Just then, a strange sound echoed through the alley, something like a distant cry, a mournful wail that sent chills racing through my body. I pulled back, suddenly aware of how alone we were. The thought of being trapped in this dark space with a man I barely knew filled me with a sickening dread. I made some excuse about needing to get home, but he just laughed, the sound echoing against the brick walls. He was not ready to let me go, and that realization sent a wave of panic washing over me. I turned to leave, but he grabbed my wrist, his grip firm and unyielding. I could see the smile on his face, but it didn't reach his eyes. The shadows around us seemed to shift, and I could feel the darkness closing in. I yanked my arm free and bolted, the adrenaline surging through my veins as I sprinted down the alley, my boots pounding against the pavement. I could hear him calling after me, but I didn't look back. I raced through the winding streets, the night swallowing my screams. I finally found myself in a well-lit area, gasping for breath, my heart pounding against my ribs. I turned to look behind me, half expecting him to leap out of the shadows, but the street was empty. Maybe I had overreacted, I thought, trying to calm my racing heart. Maybe he was just a misunderstood guy looking for connection. But as I walked home, the feeling of dread clung to me like a shadow, refusing to let go. The next day, I couldn't get him out of my mind. I tried to convince myself that I was just being dramatic, that I'd made a mountain out of a molehill. I decided to message him, just to see if he was normal. My fingers hovered over the screen, and I typed out a simple, "Hey, how's it going?" The reply came almost instantly, and I felt a twinge of excitement. He told me he missed our adventure and wanted to take me somewhere special. My heart raced at the thought, the thrill of the unknown tugging at me again. Despite my better judgment, I agreed to meet him again, this time at a supposedly haunted park. I didn't believe in ghosts, but there was something about Jake that intrigued me, pulled me in like a moth to a flame. The park was eerie, surrounded by tall trees that loomed overhead, their branches twisting like skeletal fingers. The ground was littered with fallen leaves, crunching underfoot as I walked deeper into the darkness. As I waited for him, I felt the atmosphere shift, the air growing colder and heavier. The park was deserted, and every rustle of the leaves made my heart race. I glanced at my phone, no messages. Minutes turned into what felt like hours, and just as I was about to leave, I heard his voice behind me. I turned, but it wasn't Jake. It was a figure cloaked in shadows, standing just out of reach, their face obscured. My instinct screamed at me to run, but I was frozen in place, paralyzed by fear. The figure stepped closer, and I could feel the darkness surrounding me, suffocating me. I turned to flee, but suddenly, Jake was there, blocking my way, a twisted grin on his face. I stumbled back, realizing too late I had walked straight into a trap. The figures were closing in, and panic surged through my veins. I darted past Jake, who laughed, the sound echoing in the silence like a twisted melody. I could hear footsteps behind me, the shadows gaining ground as I sprinted through the park, desperately searching for an escape. Just as I reached the edge of the park, I felt a hand grab my shoulder, spinning me around. I was face to face with Jake, but his expression had changed. The charming facade he wore was gone, replaced by something darker, more primal. There was no mistaking it now. I was in over my head, trapped in a nightmare of my own making. In that moment, everything clicked into place. This was never about connection. It was about control, about drawing me into a game I hadn't agreed to play. I pushed past him, my heart racing, and ran toward the main road, the sounds of the park fading behind me. I didn't stop until I reached the safety of the streetlights, the warmth of the glow wrapping around me like a blanket. I glanced back, breathless and trembling, half expecting to see him chasing after me. But he was gone, swallowed by the darkness. I had escaped, but the chill of that night lingered in my bones. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly avoided something far worse than I could ever have imagined. The thrill of the unknown had turned into a haunting memory, a reminder that sometimes it's best not to venture too far into the shadows. I mean, sure, I had my fair share of awkward dates from dating apps, but nothing prepared me for what was about to unfold. It all started on a Friday night when I was mindlessly scrolling through Hinge while binge-watching some reality show. I was feeling bored and a bit lonely, and even though I usually played it safe with my matches, I decided to swipe right on a guy named Derek. He had an intense look in his eyes and a few pictures that showed him hiking in some stunning mountains. He seemed adventurous, and I thought, why not? We chatted for a couple of days, and he was charming in a way that made me feel excited. He talked about his love for the outdoors and how much he enjoyed exploring abandoned places, which seemed a bit odd but intriguing. After a few back-and-forth messages, he suggested we meet up at a local coffee shop. I felt a flutter of nerves, but brushed it off. After all, what could go wrong over a cup of coffee? The day came, and I arrived at the cafe first. The atmosphere was cozy, with the smell of freshly brewed coffee wafting through the air. I sat at a table near the window, my heart racing slightly as I waited. When Derek walked in, he was even more striking in person. He wore a dark green jacket and jeans, his hair tousled in a way that looked effortlessly cool. He smiled when he saw me, and I felt a rush of relief. It was going to be fine. We chatted about our interests, and he was genuinely engaging. But as the conversation flowed, I noticed something off about him. Occasionally, his gaze would drift to the door, and he seemed to be scanning the room. It was subtle but unsettling. I dismissed it, thinking he was just a little anxious about the date, just like I was. After coffee, he suggested we take a walk through a nearby park. The sun had begun to set, casting warm orange hues across the sky. I agreed, not wanting to seem rude. As we strolled along the park paths, Derek started sharing stories about his adventures exploring old, abandoned buildings. The way he described it sent chills down my spine. He spoke with such passion, but the thrill in his voice felt like it was masking something darker. I chuckled nervously, trying to keep the conversation light. As the darkness settled around us, the park emptied out, leaving us mostly alone. The trees loomed, casting eerie shadows that danced in the dim light. I started to feel uneasy. Derek seemed to pick up on my tension and tried to lighten the mood, but it didn't work. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something. He suggested we check out an abandoned house he knew about, claiming it was just a short walk away. My gut twisted at the thought. It felt reckless and dangerous, and I hesitated. But then I thought about how I wanted to be adventurous, just like he was, and I didn't want to seem like a coward. So, against my better judgment, I agreed. As we walked, the air grew colder, and the streetlights flickered ominously. I tried to make small talk, but my mind was racing. What kind of guy takes a girl to an abandoned house on a first date? I glanced at Derek, who was walking slightly ahead of me, his silhouette barely illuminated by the weak glow of the streetlights. He seemed so confident, so sure of himself, and I felt like I was being pulled into something I couldn't control. Finally, we arrived at the house. It was a decrepit old structure, its windows boarded up, and the door sagged on its hinges. Derek pushed the door open with a creak that echoed in the silence. My heart raced as we stepped inside. The air was stale, and the floorboards creaked under our feet. I felt like I had walked into the past, and not in a cozy way. Dust motes danced in the dim light, and I could barely make out the shapes of old furniture covered in sheets, as if the house was holding on to its secrets. Derek pulled out his phone and switched on the flashlight. He was so excited, like a kid in a candy store, and I tried to match his enthusiasm. But every shadow seemed to loom larger, and I felt an irrational urge to turn back. He led me through the darkened rooms, pointing out things that were probably interesting, but only made my skin crawl. The silence was oppressive, and I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. In one of the rooms, we found an old mirror, cracked and dusty. Derek stepped closer, inspecting it, and for a moment, I felt a strange compulsion to look into it. But when I did, my reflection seemed off. The light flickered, and for a split second, I could have sworn I saw another face behind mine, a pale visage with hollow eyes that stared back at me. I stumbled back, breathless, and Derek turned, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "Did you see something?" he asked, that charming smile still plastered on his face. I shook my head, trying to laugh it off, but I could feel something dark creeping in. I wanted to leave. The walls felt like they were closing in, and I was suffocating. Just as I was about to voice my discomfort, a loud crash echoed from somewhere in the house. We both froze, our gazes snapping toward the sound. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "Probably just some old wood settling," he replied, but his tone was different now, edged with something I couldn't quite place. We moved cautiously toward the noise, my heart racing as we rounded a corner. The air felt thick and electric. I was on high alert, every instinct screaming at me to get out. We entered a dimly lit room with a shattered window, the moonlight spilling in and casting eerie shadows. The room was filled with broken furniture and old newspapers, But what drew my attention was a door in the corner, slightly ajar. Derek pushed the door open wider, revealing a dark staircase leading down into the basement. "Let's check it out," he said, his excitement palpable, but I felt paralyzed. This wasn't just a thrill anymore. It felt wrong. "No, I think we should go," I finally managed to say, my voice shaking. But Derek's expression shifted, the warmth fading from his eyes. "Don't be scared. It'll be fun." I took a step back, feeling the wall pressing against me, a wave of dread washing over me. Suddenly, the door we'd entered through slammed shut, and we were plunged into darkness. Panic surged through me as I fumbled for my phone, desperately trying to turn on the flashlight. "Derek," I called out, but my voice echoed back, swallowed by the oppressive silence. I felt a move closer, and I could sense the change in him, the shift from charming to predatory. "Let's go deeper," he said, and the way he said it made my blood run cold. The flashlight flickered to life just as I turned to run, illuminating his face in a way that made everything in my gut scream for me to get out. But before I could, he lunged at me, and everything went black. When I came to, I was lying on the floor of the room, my phone still clutched in my hand. I scrambled to my feet, the adrenaline pumping through me as I reached for the door. It creaked open, and I rushed outside, the cool night air hitting me like a shockwave. I ran, not looking back, not daring to see if he was behind me. I stumbled into the street, my heart racing. The house loomed behind me, dark and silent, like a predator waiting for its next victim. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped something terrible. I glanced back one last time, but the house was just an old, abandoned shell, the moonlight casting an eerie glow over it. Weeks later, I received a notification on Hinge. Derek had sent me a message. My stomach dropped as I opened it, heart pounding in my chest. The message read, "I had a great time. Let's explore again soon." My hands trembled as I stared at the screen, the realization crashing down on me like a wave. The whole time, I thought I was the one in control, but maybe I had been just another ghost haunting his dark adventures. I deleted the app, my mind racing with the thought that he was still out there, lurking, waiting for his next chance. I had escaped the house, but I knew I hadn't escaped him. I had been swiping through Hinge for weeks, my thumb growing tired from the endless carousel of faces smiling back at me. The usual crowd of overly filtered selfies and cheesy bios started to blend together, until one profile caught my eye. Her name was Mia, and her pictures were different. No post shots in trendy cafes or cute dog pics. Instead, she had a series of moody black and white images, all with a haunting intensity that pulled me in. There was a certain darkness about her that intrigued me, a rawness that felt real in a world of curated perfection. We matched, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. She was witty, sharp, and had an almost magnetic charm. As we chatted late into the night, I felt a connection that I hadn't experienced with anyone else. When she suggested we meet up, I was more than ready. She proposed a hidden spot in the woods, a place she claimed held stories of lost lovers and forgotten secrets. Intrigued and a bit nervous, I agreed, thinking it would be an adventure, a break from the mundane. The day of our meeting rolled around, and as I drove to the secluded location, a sense of foreboding settled in my stomach. The trees loomed over the narrow path, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. I parked my car and stepped out, the crunch of gravel underfoot echoing in the stillness. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and something else, something sweet yet rotten. I brushed it off as my imagination running wild and made my way deeper into the woods, following the sound of rustling leaves. Mia stood there, illuminated by the dappled sunlight filtering through the branches. She wore a flowing white dress that danced in the breeze, giving her an ethereal quality. As I approached, her smile widened, revealing an unsettling enthusiasm. We exchanged pleasantries, but something about her eyes felt off, as if they were hiding something beneath the surface. I shrugged it off, chalking it up to my nerves. We ventured further into the woods, laughing and sharing stories, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The trees whispered secrets in the wind, and every so often, I catch a glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye. I try to focus on Mia, her laughter bubbling up like a melody, yet the unease gnawed at me. The deeper we went, the thicker the shadows became, wrapping around us like a shroud. At one point, we stumbled upon an old, weathered cabin hidden among the trees. It looked abandoned, its wooden walls splintered and darkened by time. Mia's eyes sparkled with mischief as she suggested we explore it. I hesitated. Something about the place felt wrong, but my curiosity got the better of me, and I followed her inside, the creaking door protesting as we stepped over the threshold. The interior was cluttered with dust and cobwebs, remnants of a life once lived. Old furniture lay strewn about, and the air was thick with the smell of rot. I felt a chill run down my spine as I stepped further in, the floorboards groaning under my weight. Mia seemed unfazed, her excitement palpable as she rummaged through the debris. She picked up an old photograph, its edges frayed, and held it up to the light. I leaned closer to see, but the image was too faded to make out any details. Mia's fingers lingered on the photo, her expression shifting from playful to somber in an instant. She muttered something about lost souls and broken dreams, and for a moment, I felt a wave of sadness wash over me. But there was something more lurking beneath her words, something dark and sinister. As we explored the cabin, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside seemed amplified, and I found myself glancing over my shoulder. Mia, however, continued to dig through the remnants, her laughter echoing off the walls. It was infectious, yet it felt hollow, like a mask she wore to hide something deeper. We found an old journal, its pages yellowed and brittle. Curiosity piqued. I opened it and began to read. The entries detailed the life of a woman who had lived in the cabin long ago, filled with tales of love and loss that turned darker with each page. As I read about her descent into madness, I felt a chill run through me. The words danced in my mind, intertwining with the sense of dread growing in the pit of my stomach. Mia's laughter faded, and I looked up to find her staring at me with an intensity that made my heart race. "What do you think?" she asked, her voice low and almost hypnotic. I felt a shiver of fear run through me as I tried to gather my thoughts. I muttered something about the journal being sad, but as I looked into her eyes, I saw a flicker of something darker, a glimmer of insanity. The atmosphere shifted, the air thickening with tension. I suddenly felt trapped, as if the very walls of the cabin were closing in around me. I tried to back away, but Mia stepped closer, her presence suffocating. "You know," she said, her voice almost a whisper, "this place has a way of revealing the truth." My heart raced as I darted toward the door, but she blocked my path, her smile twisting into something sinister. Panic surged within me, and I realized I had underestimated her. The Mia I had been talking to was gone, replaced by someone, or something, far more terrifying. I glanced around, searching for an escape, but the cabin felt like a maze, each corner leading me deeper into despair. In a desperate bid for freedom, I shoved past her, sprinting through the door and into the chaotic wilderness outside. I could hear her laughter trailing behind me, echoing in the trees. The woods transformed into a labyrinth, branches clawing at my skin as I ran. My breath came in ragged gasps, and the shadows danced menacingly around me, as if they were alive. Just when I thought I had lost her, I stumbled upon an old graveyard, the headstones crooked and forgotten. Panic surged as I realized the names etched into the stone. They were all women, all connected to the cabin. I felt a chill run through me, and as I turned to flee, there she was, Mia, standing at the edge of the clearing with an eerie calmness. In a voice that was almost melodic, she spoke. "It's beautiful here, don't you think?" I felt the ground shift beneath me, the weight of dread pressing down. I backed away, but the headstones seemed to close in around me, trapping me in a nightmare. In that moment, the truth hit me like a freight train. Mia wasn't just a woman I had met on a dating app. She was the embodiment of the lost souls, the darkness that had consumed those who had come before. Each laugh, each smile was a mask, hiding the horror beneath. I turned to run, but the ground gave way, and I fell into a void, the laughter echoing in my ears, a haunting reminder that I had walked right into a trap. As the darkness enveloped me, I realized the truth. Mia was no longer just a girl I had met online. She was the phantom of the woods, a chilling reminder that sometimes what seems beautiful can hide the deepest horrors. I'd never thought I'd be using a dating app, let alone one with a reputation for being a little on the dark side. But there I was, scrolling through profiles on Hinge, feeling oddly adventurous. Friends had told me about their weird experiences, matching with guys who turned out to be total freaks. But maybe I was due for a little excitement in my life, you know? I picked my profile pic carefully, showcasing my best side, and wrote a witty bio, hoping to attract someone interesting. After a few swipes and some cringeworthy conversations, I matched with someone named Ethan. His profile had an air of mystery, dark hair, brooding eyes that seemed to look right through the camera, and a bio that was intriguing but vague. He mentioned being into horror films and long hikes, which piqued my interest. I sent him a message, and we hit it off surprisingly well. We talked about everything from our favorite scary movies to our childhood fears. There was something magnetic about him, a charm that made me forget the warnings I'd heard about online dating. After a few days of chatting, Ethan suggested we meet in person. He proposed a local coffee shop, but I thought it would be fun to go somewhere a bit more interesting. I suggested a hike in the woods near my town. I was nervous, but the thrill of it all kept me going. I figured, if it went well, we'd have an amazing story to tell. If not, well, I could always run back to my car. The day of our date was overcast, the sky a blanket of gray that hinted at possible rain. I pulled up to the trailhead, feeling a mix of excitement and dread. Ethan was already waiting for me, leaning against his car, a small backpack slung over one shoulder. When he saw me, he smiled, and I felt my heart race. Maybe this was going to be something special after all. As we walked into the woods, the atmosphere shifted. The trees towered above us, their branches weaving together to create a canopy that blocked out most of the light. I could hear the crunch of leaves beneath our feet and the distant call of crows. But there was something else, a strange silence that felt heavy and oppressive. I tried to shake it off, focusing instead on Ethan's stories about his favorite horror films. His voice was smooth, and his passion was infectious. I found myself leaning in closer, hanging on his every word. We hiked deeper into the woods, the trails narrowing until we were surrounded by tall trees. The air grew cooler, and I shivered slightly. I could feel a prickle of unease creeping up my spine, but I brushed it aside. It was just the woods, right? After a while, we came to a clearing, a small, serene spot with wildflowers and a small stream trickling through. Ethan suggested we take a break, and I nodded, grateful for the chance to catch my breath. We sat on a fallen log, and he pulled out a water bottle, offering me a sip. I accepted, feeling a strange thrill as our fingers brushed. But something about the clearing felt off. The silence was deafening, and I could hear the soft rustling of leaves, almost as if they were whispering secrets. It made my heart race, but I pushed the thought away and focused on him. Ethan talked about his love for hiking, how he felt the most alive in nature, and I couldn't help but admire his passion. He had a way of making everything sound so enchanting. As we sat there, I felt a sense of intimacy growing between us. But then, out of nowhere, Ethan's demeanor shifted. He looked over my shoulder, his expression darkening. I turned to see what had caught his attention, but there was nothing there. Just trees, shadows, and the whisper of the wind. When I looked back at him, he was grinning, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. It was unsettling. He started to tell me a story about a couple who had gone hiking and disappeared under mysterious circumstances. The way he spoke sent chills down my spine. His words were like a spell, weaving a dark picture in my mind. I tried to laugh it off, but I could feel a knot tightening in my stomach. The forest felt alive, as if it was watching us. As the sun began to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows, I suggested we head back. Ethan seemed taken aback, as though he hadn't realized how late it had gotten. He insisted on continuing deeper into the woods, claiming there was a beautiful overlook just a little further on. My instinct screamed at me to turn back, but I didn't want to seem rude or unadventurous. We pressed on, and the atmosphere grew heavier. The trees felt like they were closing in, and I had to fight the urge to run. The path twisted and turned, and I could feel my heart racing. I glanced at Ethan, who was now completely absorbed in his surroundings, his eyes glinting in the dim light. He seemed different somehow, almost predatory. Finally, we reached the overlook, but it was nothing like I had imagined. The view was obscured by thick fog, and the air felt electric with tension. Ethan stood at the edge, staring into the mist, and I began to feel trapped. I took a few steps back, trying to shake the unease, but it clung to me like a shadow. As I stood there, I heard a rustle behind me. The sound was low and menacing, and I turned to see a figure emerging from the trees. My heart stopped. It was a man, disheveled and wild-eyed, with dirt caked on his skin. He looked lost, but there was something in his gaze that sent a chill through me. Ethan turned at the sound, and for a moment, his expression was unreadable. Then he smiled again, but it was colder than before. The stranger approached, and I could feel panic rising in my throat. I glanced between Ethan and the man, trying to gauge the situation. Just then, the stranger spoke, his voice hoarse and urgent. He warned us about the woods, about people who had vanished, about the darkness that consumed those who lingered too long. I wanted to run, but I was frozen in place, caught in the web of tension. Ethan's demeanor changed once more, his charm slipping. He stepped forward, his voice low and threatening as he confronted the man. I couldn't make out the words, but the tension between them was palpable. The stranger's eyes darted between Ethan and me, and I could sense his desperation. Suddenly, in a flash, Ethan lunged at the man, and I screamed, the sound echoing through the trees. The two fell to the ground, wrestling in the leaves. I stumbled back, my heart racing, and in that moment of chaos, I made a choice. I turned and ran, sprinting through the trees, branches scratching at my arms as I pushed through the underbrush. I didn't stop until I reached the trailhead, gasping for breath, my heart pounding in my ears. I fumbled for my phone, dialing for help, but all I could think about was Ethan, his dark charm, his stories, and the way he had turned into something terrifying. As I waited for the police, I glanced back at the woods, and in that moment, I realized I had left my backpack behind. My phone, my wallet, everything. But worse than that was the realization that I had unknowingly stepped into a nightmare. Ethan had lured me here, and I was just another character in his twisted tale. When the police arrived, I was shaking, recounting the events as best I could. They searched the area, but found nothing. No sign of Ethan, no trace of the stranger. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. I left the woods, feeling a sense of dread that would linger long after. The following days were a blur. I deleted the app, vowing never to look back. But every time I closed my eyes, I could see Ethan's smile, the darkness behind it, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped something far worse than a bad date. The woods were quiet now, but I knew better. I had never considered dating apps to be my thing. Swiping left and right felt like a chore, not to mention the weird profiles and endless small talk. But after my breakup, I thought it might be time to dip my toes into the pool of modern romance. That's how I found myself on Hinge, scrolling through a sea of faces and bios that ranged from quirky to downright bizarre. It wasn't long before I stumbled upon a profile that caught my eye. His name was Jake, and he looked like someone who might just get my humor. His bio was a mix of self-deprecation and wit that made me chuckle. We matched quickly, and our conversation flowed effortlessly, like we were old friends catching up after years apart. As we chatted, Jake mentioned he lived in an old house at the edge of town, a fact that sent a small thrill down my spine. There was something about a crumbling Victorian that added a layer of mystery, and I found myself asking him more about it. He told me stories of how the house creaked at night, how the wind howled through the broken windows, and how he often felt like he wasn't alone. I thought he was trying to impress me, but there was a sincerity in his voice that made me wonder. After a week of texting and getting to know each other, Jake finally invited me over. His excitement was palpable, and I felt a rush of adrenaline mixed with nerves. I spent the day getting ready, picking out the perfect outfit that was casual yet flattering. I even practiced my best smile in the mirror a few times. It was just a casual hangout, but my heart raced like it was the first date of my life. The evening air was thick with an eerie fog as I drove to his house. The streetlights flickered sporadically, casting shadows that danced along the pavement. When I pulled up to his place, I felt a wave of unease wash over me. The house loomed ahead, its peeling paint and overgrown garden giving it an almost sinister appearance. I parked my car, took a deep breath, and stepped out, shaking off the feeling. After all, I was here to meet Jake, not to get spooked by a house. He greeted me at the door with a grin that made my heart flutter. We exchanged pleasantries, and as I stepped inside, I was engulfed by the smell of old wood and something faintly sweet, like cinnamon. The interior matched the exterior, charming in a way that felt haunting. The walls were lined with framed photographs, some of which looked like they were from a different era. I felt like I had stepped into a time capsule. As we settled into the living room, Jake poured us each a glass of wine. The conversation flowed easily, darting from topics like favorite movies to childhood memories. But as the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something off about the house. I glanced at the windows, noticing how the fog pressed against the glass like a living entity. It felt like the house was watching us. Jake seemed to notice my discomfort, and he laughed it off, saying the house had a reputation among his friends. They teased him about it being haunted, but he assured me it was all just silly stories. I nodded along, but my gut told me there was more to it. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, Jake suggested we take a tour of the house. I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. We wandered through the dimly lit hallways, each room revealing more of the house's quirks. The kitchen had an old-fashioned charm, but it was the living room that struck me the most. An ornate mirror hung on the wall, the glass slightly warped. I caught a glimpse of myself and felt a shiver run down my spine. Jake noticed my reaction and chuckled, saying it was his favorite piece in the house. He told me it had belonged to his grandmother, who had passed away in the house years ago. I felt a pang of sadness for him. Losing a loved one is never easy, and it seemed he carried that weight with him. As we continued the tour, I noticed something strange. In one of the upstairs rooms, there was a door that seemed to lead to a small attic. It was slightly ajar, and I could feel a draft pulling at my skin. I asked Jake about it, but he hesitated, mumbling something about it being just storage. I felt an inexplicable urge to see what was inside, but I held back, sensing that I might be crossing some unspoken boundary. The atmosphere shifted as we returned to the living room. The shadows felt heavier, and the air grew thick with tension. Jake offered me more wine, but I suddenly felt lightheaded. I excused myself to the restroom, needing a moment to gather my thoughts. As I walked down the hall, I caught glimpses of the old photographs again, and one in particular made my heart race. It was a picture of a young woman who looked eerily like me, wearing a dress that seemed straight out of the past. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the feeling of dread creeping back in. I splashed some water on my face and took a deep breath. When I returned to the living room, Jake was sitting in silence, staring at the mirror. His expression was distant, almost haunting. I asked if he was okay, but he didn't respond. That's when I noticed the mirror again, reflecting not just us, but also a flicker of movement behind us. I spun around, heart pounding, but there was nothing there. The tension was thick as I tried to lighten the mood, joking about the spooky vibe of the house. Jake finally shook himself from whatever trance he was in and laughed along, but something felt off. I couldn't tell if it was the house or him, but I began to feel trapped inside this old, creaking structure. We moved back to the couch, and I tried to focus on Jake, but the unease nestled deeper in my gut. I felt a pressing urge to leave, but didn't want to seem rude. I tried to gauge his mood, hoping he'd suggest we wrap it up, but he seemed more focused on the mirror. I could sense an energy shift in the room. It felt alive, almost pulsating. Suddenly, Jake stood up and walked toward the mirror. I froze, watching him as he reached out to touch it. My heart raced as I felt the air grow colder. Just as his fingers brushed against the glass, a loud crash echoed from the attic, shaking the very foundation of the house. Jake jumped back, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. We both stood there, staring at the mirror, our breath held in unison. The crash seemed to awaken something dormant within the house, sending a tremor through the walls. I felt a rush of adrenaline and instinctively grabbed Jake, urging him to leave. But he hesitated, whispering something under his breath. I couldn't make it out, but it sounded like he was calling for someone. Panic surged through me as I pulled him toward the door. The shadows felt alive, closing in around us, and I could hear whispers that made no sense. As we reached the front door, it swung shut with a force that rattled the old hinges. I turned to Jake, my heart racing, and saw that he was no longer the man I had been conversing with. His eyes were dark, almost hollow, and a twisted smile crept across his face. The warmth I had felt earlier was gone, replaced by a chilling realization. This was not just a date. With a surge of instinct, I pushed past him and yanked open the door, running into the night without looking back. The fog enveloped me, but I didn't care. I sprinted to my car, my breath coming in ragged gasps, the shadows of the house looming behind me. As I sped away, I glanced in the rearview mirror, and for a moment, I thought I saw that young woman from the photograph, standing at the window, watching me with a knowing smile. My heart sank as I realized I had escaped one horror only to stumble into another, one that would haunt me long after that night. The house faded into the mist, but I knew I would never shake the feeling that it wasn't just Jake who had invited me in. The true horror lingered in the walls, waiting for its next unwitting guest.